Welcome to Homes and Estates for Today and Tomorrow. Join us to learn more about trends in design and residential architecture. Joining us today is Sam Mitchell, architect, designer, and founder of Mitchell Studios, located in New Haven and Greenwich, Connecticut. Welcome, Sam.
Thank you, Sabine. Nice to be here.
I'm very curious about your experience talking to people about their mindset around building a home these days.
It's somewhat counterintuitive that we're finding that people are building much more for themselves than they were 3 or 4 years ago. In 2007, up to 2007, 2008, people really thought about resale when they were building a house. Even if it was a home they were building for themselves, in the back of their mind, they were thinking of a property as an investment. And I think people now see that it's more the home that they're building, and they're building just what they want, assuming that they're not going to be leaving anytime soon. So they're really committed to what they're doing.
And that sounds like a bit of a silver lining in a way, because that gives you freedom.
It does, because you're not guessing about some absent third party, what that person might want with a house. You're dealing with the people who are in the room.
And is there a sense that it's a great time to build these days? Costs are a little bit less expensive, perhaps? What is the sentiment around?
I think it's a good time to build. I don't think we ever realized a decrease in prices like people expected. I think that on the margins that some tradesmen dropped out of the game. There wasn't enough work to go around, and there is competition. But I think the result is that it's more clients get better attention rather than better pricing. There aren't, everyone isn't running around so crazily chasing the work, or they, I guess, are chasing the work, but they're not so overscheduled that they can't pay attention to the work that they're on. Mm-hmm. So the quality's always been high. I think it's maybe a notch higher than it was, even if things are not any less expensive.
And tell me about your clients. Is there a particular event in their lives, such as kids leaving for college, and now they're motivated to think about building a home for the next 20 years of their lives? Are there certain moments in time when you find people are making decisions to build a home? I
think in my office, that's the majority of our work is for people with older children who are they're either thinking about what the next step is when their children are off to college or completely out of the house, or they're they're thinking about how they can encourage their grandchildren to come to visit. And I think it's the time when people can think about a house, when they're not so busy with their younger children.
Good point.
They can commit to a project like that. They can take 2, 3, 4 years.
And what kind of design criteria and design styles does that translate into then?
It's a little bit going back to the first question, that people are thinking about how they are really going to use the house. Mm-hmm. So they're not labeling rooms the way you would in a traditional house. It's not living room to the right, dining room to the left. Even if it does still have a living room and a dining room, it's not a museum for furniture. The people building houses are trying to think of how they use those spaces. And we're finding that we're not eliminating the living room, as you sometimes hear. We're just trying to make it more inviting. So it ends up being a room that's used, even if there is something else that's called a family room. The living room will get used.
When the grandkids are coming.
Well, no. I think it's important to make it part of the life of the house. Mm-hmm. Any room part of the life of the house, no matter who's occupying it. Mm-hmm. So that could be in a living room that circulation moves through it. There could be a stair could be in the living room, so that every morning you come downstairs, you're walking into your living room. Even if you don't stop there to read, you're crossing the living room on the way to the kitchen. And that keeps all of those spaces alive and makes them interesting. And then it may be that you stop in that room and sit for a while. If you don't encourage that kind of circulation for the space, they can be abandoned and and never used.
So are you, in your work, then proposing various sort of far-out design concepts in a way and looking for feedback from your clients? Is that kind of the process that you go through? How do you wind up at solutions?
I wouldn't say any of it goes to far out. Even more contemporary things that we work on tend to have rooms tend to have four walls, even if they're defined less formally. But we will have conversations about moving through the room and creating a plan that activates all the rooms in the house at some point during the day. Mm-hmm. So I think that is part of the discussion early on in the design process.
Do you find that you have clients from around the world these days? There's so much of a trend toward globalization. People travel mm-hmm. very easily. We live a few years in one country, then move to another country, perhaps. Do you find that translating into your practice as well?
Somewhat. We've had a couple of international clients, but I'm noticing more, though, that even domestic clients of ours have foreign interests, and they're spending more of their time outside of the country. They're bringing different ideas back, different furniture, different art, and different cultural influences. New York is just, New York and the New York suburbs are a base, but we have clients who may, be in Moscow and London and in Beijing.
What is the common denominator, let's say, between an Asian style and mm-hmm. a more New England type of vernacular?
I think the universal things that might tie those together would be color, texture, scale. And so I think you can mix those things together, and a lot of it comes out in the decorating end. But you can mix many styles and many influences mm-hmm. if you have some kind of universal theme that runs through those, or juxtaposes those, but that you're doing it in a willful way.
Is there something that you would call a classical dimension? Sort of the golden rule, if you will, to go to that kind of ties everything together?
I'm obsessive about scale, and all of our work starts out with a piece of paper and pencil. So we're drawing, and we're finding our way around the design through drawing, and in piles of paper that we end up discarding. But as a generative process, if you're beginning with a pencil in your hand, you have that connection to a human scale. And I think we try to follow through that in every element of the design. So, and we were talking about light and shadow. When we're designing moldings, that's the way we're thinking of it, is that it's a line drawing, but it's in three dimensions, and thinking about what shadows are cast and how that relates to the whole.
Hand drawing, you meaning literally sitting there with a pencil and making sketch upon sketch that at some point then later on in the process gets translated into some CAD system. That's
right. So we're always going from pencil to CAD drawings. The pencil is the way we find the design. The CAD drawings are the way it's defined, and the way we can refine it and ensure its accuracy during the construction process.
Somewhat unusual as a
mm-hmm.
design process, I would say, these days.
I think it probably is. And we also build physical models. I think people respond to those in a different way than computer renderings. We're capable of producing computer simulations, which we do from time to time, but they always end up being cold. And like with a pencil, having something that you can hold in your hand and you can turn, and not viewing it on a monitor, but viewing it in analog space mm-hmm. Is still meaningful. And I think you discover things in a different way when you have the physical object, or when you have to draw something with your hand.
Where do you start the whole design process? Is there a room? Is there a thought? Is there a concept? Is there a site plan? Where does it start?
I do always start with a site plan, but beyond that, the inspiration can come from anywhere. It could be a single photograph. It can be the site itself. I mean, the site itself will always play into it. It can be the topography, the wind, the sun. We've had clients come to us with a half a dozen full binders of images. We had one client come in with a furniture plan for a house with no walls, just what the furniture was going to be in each of the main rooms, and asked us to build a house around that.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And one project we did had the typical list of rooms, and our client's only direction was surprise us.
An architect's dream.
Great assignment, right, right.
So at one point you said to me, my goal is to create a space that brings joy to my client. Tell me a little more about that.
It can be an experience of a space. It can be, and that can be how the light moves, how the light passes through during the day. It can be how you walk through a space. It can be the procession of compressed spaces to open spaces. But it can be something that's playful. We just finished a house in New Jersey that in one design meeting we were talking. It's a very serious house in general, but there's a very extensive basement playroom, gym, art room. And from the mudroom, we were working on the stair that connected to that lower level. And we just threw out the idea of having a slide because the kids would, it'd be a fun way to get to the basement. And my client seized on it right away. So we have it's a 12-foot tall spiral slide, which is bigger than you'll find in a typical playground. And when it was available, we had electricians who would take the slide down to the basement during construction, and it sits opposite the stair in the mudroom, and it's kind of a fun feature in that house.
Very interesting. And I also get the idea of coming down into a space and really just enjoying the basic ingredients, the light, the shadow, the harmony of it all. So I can see both sides of that pretty easily.
Right.
Kitchens are always one of those spaces that I think say a lot about a house. There's a lot of work that goes into them. They're obviously functional spaces, but they're also a style component of a house.
Right.
I mean, we think back across the centuries, and we are coming from kitchens that were basically in basement spaces for servants to
but
now.
Aren't some of those the best spaces in those grand houses?
Interesting.
I think they really are.
And what made them so great?
Maybe some of it is, maybe in my opinion, some of it is because underneath it all, I'm a modernist, and I think that the design starts with answering a functional question, and that you can take function to mean a lot of different things. Some of it can be how you prepare a meal, but some of it can be more spiritual. But for instance, we were talking about this in my office today at Marble House in Newport. I don't know if you've been on that tour.
Yes, I've been there.
The best room in the whole house is the butler's pantry. It's a 2-story. It's effectively a library for china and silver with a second floor balcony. Really wonderful space, and it's actually scaled appropriately, unlike most of the rest of the house.
So how would you translate that butler's pantry into a house that somebody may want to live in? It's likely not going to be a 2-story elaborate room, but at the same time, what are the elements that then feed into today's butler's pantry?
A lot of things end at these default design decisions that have been passed down from kitchen companies, I guess. That a counter should be 36 inches high, that there should be 18 inches between countertop and an upper cabinet, that you have to have upper cabinets at all. And even the details of the cabinets tend to have if it's a paneled kitchen, every panel has the same depth of recess and same frame dimensions. So ordinarily the manipulations are on a very small number of issues. We like to question those things. So, and you'll notice the difference. For instance, if a typical American house has ceilings that are 8 feet high in the bedrooms, and you make that 8'2", it's noticeable just because it's different from
2 inches.
Sure, because it's different from what the default. So the same thing with kitchen cabinets. That if you have 15 inches of space between the, I mean, all these seem like small things, but if there's 15 inches instead of 18 inches, the room feels different. And it may not be something that someone can point to, but there is a different sense of scale, and at least there's an attention to all those things. It's not just accepted that this is the way it's done, but it's considered.
We have a lot of appliances also to think about, and sometimes they become the choking point in a design. How do you deal with them?
It depends on the design. Generality, I like to show the appliances to be honest about what they are, not covered. The material difference is interesting, that whether it's a stainless steel or a more custom enameled finish on an appliance, there's an opportunity to create interest rather than make it look like the rest of the kitchen. There's some things we like to put away. We always struggle with microwaves because I think it's the ugliest appliance in the kitchen. So when we build a pantry, we put the microwave in the pantry.
I haven't seen that all that often, I have to say.
Probably not.
What I'm taking away from your comment just now is that you're a designer. You really want to think about every element that's everywhere.
That's right.
And I want to swing your attention to the hardware that you brought in today, these samples too. Tell me a little bit about them.
Well, we started this. It's been kind of a project that we've been working on in the background of other things. We started this actually probably almost 3 years ago. And what we wanted to do, we rarely find what we're looking for, exactly what we're looking for when we're selecting hardware. So we wanted to do something that was a little bit different, and where we started was to create hardware that feels good in your hand. And
touchware, as I call it. I think it's a misnomer to call them hardware. It should be touchware.
That's apt description. So to do that, I guess like drawing, we started by molding shapes by hand so that they had the right feel. This one, for instance, has this end that your thumb just naturally fits into.
Exactly, I'm feeling it now.
So, but then the challenge was to be able to make this into something, a production piece. And you can't, no matter how precise you can mold something by hand, you cannot make it symmetrical.
Right.
On the other hand, we didn't want to lose the hand molded feel of it. Yeah. So the first time through. This one, if you can see, has all these dots on it.
Yeah.
We had 3D scans on a very high-tech lab that scanned these and made them into CAD files that we could then manipulate. They ended up being huge. The files were so big that they were really hard to work with. So we ended up going back to other software, which was getting better during that same period, and taking the second generation and creating a new file from that. So in these, you can see a number of iterations. I think the one that you're holding is our final, which kind of captures all the things that we wanted to do. That it feels good in your hand and has an elegance that I don't think we were finding anywhere else.
So from here, it'll be cast in some metal.
Right.
And
that's right.
Then you will select certain finishes, I presume.
Right. We're doing. We've done a couple of things already. This was a brass handle that we did, and we've adapted that since and added some other finishes.
Talking about new techniques and new materials, where are you on some of the new technologies, green technologies?
We've been using so-called green technologies for quite a long time. And the first thing I think you have to accept with green technologies is if you're building, it's not green. So what you're doing is the best you can when you're using a tremendous amount of resources. We've been lucky enough to have a series of clients over a long period of time who take stewardship seriously and were willing to invest essentially by being early adapters to technologies. So we did our first geothermal or ground source heating and cooling system 13 or 14 years ago. That was, if you know the technology, was an open loop system, which no one is doing anymore. We also did a house that used a full photovoltaic array, geothermal heating and cooling, all LED lighting, and that was several years ago when LED lighting was outrageously priced. But it was a descendant of a very prominent, former president and environmentalist, and he thought it was his duty to do that, figuring that for the next person it was going to be less expensive because he was doing it.
Very encouraging. I like people who have some principle and say, this is what I stand for, this is what I'd like to have, and find a way to do it.
Right, right. And I think that, and those people have moved the technology forward. And I think what we're getting now, is more accessible to more people, and it's more efficient and better engineered, and we keep taking those steps forward.
And is it now really truly part of just about every project that you consider?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think it's fading away a little bit, but the labeling of projects for LEED, and LEED is a good tool, but it's somewhat arbitrary in what counts towards a LEED grading. We try to be responsible about the use of materials and promote efficient technologies by asking as little as possible of your heating and cooling, of your electrical loads, of your gas or water needs.
Do you see reductions in space at all? Are your homes smaller today, more compact?
I think they may be a little bit more compact just because people are layer the uses of their spaces in a different way, so they're trying to get more out of everything that they build. But I think, again, I think we've been working with some unusual people for a while who've had this stewardship mentality, so that they could build larger and they didn't, because they didn't believe in it, I guess, more than anything else.
Do they come from larger homes to?
Some have. And I think that may be part of it too. I mean, besides the fact of doing things efficiently and being responsible, I think people get weary of the maintenance of a very large house, which is understandable. I mean, it's someone's full-time job.
It's a commitment. There's no question about it.
Right.
And tell me, what is the one thing, if I was going to think about building a house today, where should I start in my thinking? And what is sort of the one thing that I should really be aware of, be prepared for? Is maybe the better way to put it.
Be prepared for is the right way to put it, because I think that's what it is there are literally a million questions that need to be answered when you're building a house. I think you first have to acknowledge that that's the case, and then you have to decide whether you're willing to take on some part of those million questions, or whether you want to give those questions to a design professional and a builder who you trust. There will be a time commitment if you're building something. If you find the right people to work with, and I think those relationships are really important, because you spend so much time and on such an intimate basis when you're building something that you have to trust those people. But you can winnow down those million questions to 10,000 if you find people you can trust who can answer the 990,000 and give you good and focused choices on the other 10,000.
So be prepared for quite a bit of time to go over those myriad of details.
Right, but it can be a lot of fun, and it should be. And I think that that a project that isn't enjoyable during the process is in some ways failed as a built object. The process is all part of it, just like the sequence of moving through it when it's completed. And you need to have a good history with that house from the beginning. The same house that I was describing to you in New Jersey was 6 years from beginning to end.
Whoa!
And in year 4, I think the builder was on the project for 3.5 years.
That's still a long time.
Still a long time. A year before the finish, so 2.5 years of construction and 4.5 years of the whole project. There was one job meeting where the owner said to me, "I'm having so much fun with this. I don't want this to end." And that's the way they approached the project. Every room was an opportunity to do something great.
Let me just ask you point blank, the dreaded change orders.
Mm-hmm.
Good, bad? Should you avoid them? When are they problematic?
No, I think there's a great disservice to the change order done in cocktail parties around the country. A change order only means that there's a difference in scope, and I think people need to. If you're building a house, you're a homeowner. You may have done it once. You may have built a house once before or twice before, but it hasn't been many times. So you can't possibly know everything about the house or make all the decisions before the project starts. They're just too many decisions, and because I think you have to be open to the evolution of the process. I mean, when I make a drawing, I have a pretty good idea of what that space will be when it's built, but I don't expect other people to, and they likely don't. So when they walk into a room when it's at the framing stage, they should be able to think about doing something a little bit different than what's on their drawing. A change order is only a real negative if work is being repeated. Something has to be torn down and done again. That's a change order that's bad because someone hasn't planned right or someone hasn't communicated properly. So something was missed along the way. Those I dread as well as anyone else because it's my job to make sure everyone understands what's supposed to be happening. But to add something to a project, to change a decision about materials, the kitchen countertops or bathroom tile, I think is an opportunity that people should not pass on because it's called a change order.
As long as you, the client, the homeowner, is really committed to the process and gets into it, that's really, the whole event becomes a process and a learning curve and something to look forward to, but also to be very present during the process.
Yes, I think that's exactly it.
I think a lot of people would expect to go to an architect's office and say, here's kind of what I want, here's my litany of photographs, put it together, build it for me, please. And I'll write the checks. But to be that engaged in the process is news to a lot of people, I would think.
Worked on a project a number of years ago with a very eloquent British interior designer who in one meeting was talking about process and made the distinction of a house versus a car. You may enjoy the car for 5 or maybe even 10 years, but you're going to turn it in. You're going to trade it in. And you're going to be on to the next car. A house is a completely different thing because it is it's where your life a good portion of your life happens.
Yeah.
And it needs to be approached differently from an object like a car.
On that note, thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
I enjoyed it tremendously. To our viewers, for a recast of this program, please go to Sabine'sHome.com. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, visit us online, and for now, this is Sabine of Sabine'sHome.com. So long.